Hey, what's up, guys?
Oh, we're live streaming again.
Accidentally live streaming again. Yeah, it's funny.
Consummate
Casey, welcome,
professionals.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's a joy to chat with you guys. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, and
yeah,
Casey, like we got very close to, but not quite to the perennial flaw that we have on the show where we don't hit record early enough, and like all the good shit happens before. Yep. So we were dancing in that topic. We were almost there. We were getting there, and I'm like, oh fuck. We got to hit record like right now, guys. Like right now, like stop. So, hey man,
let's go.
Great having you on. Thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate you spending some time with us. So, just start.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited.
Yeah, man. Do you want to introduce yourself, Casey? Because like no one can tell you about you better than you.
There you go. Yeah. I'll make a bunch of stuff up. Yeah. After I won the Super Bowl, I traveled to Mars.
Yeah.
My name is my name's Casey. I have been a personal trainer for 17 years now. I was studying architecture in college and joined a gym to start working out in the off season for cycling, and started watching the personal trainers, and what they were doing looked really interesting, and they were using heart rate monitors, which I'd been using for several years. And so I ended up getting a certification that I needed to start personal training as just kind of a stopgap for a little while until I got into architecture. And luckily I've been able to make it into a career, which has been really nice. I got my nutrition coaching certification several years later. So I do both personal training and nutrition coaching now. My role at the big corporate gym that I was at was using metabolic carts. So using a device that would measure people's breath and their breathing to analyze how many calories they would be burning, or to do things like VO2 max testing. If you're familiar with that. And also our machine would measure what we call respiratory quotient, or respiratory exchange ratio, is two names for the same thing, which is basically the difference between the oxygen and carbon dioxide that would exchange in your body, which would tell you not only how many calories you would burn, but where the calories you were burning would come from. What percentage of your calories at different intensities would come from fat, and what percentage would come from carbohydrates. And so eventually
is that another way of calculating like a basal metabolic rate?
Exactly. Yeah.
And this is a mask you wear, right, Casey? Because I have a feeling the company has been pretty intense in my Instagram they're like, oh, you have exercise with oxygen therapy, you have a Carol bike, and it's like, but we're not a gym. No, but this will tell Metabolic Health. And I'm like, I agree with you.
It would be great if I was a gym.
I love that, but we're not a gym.
Yeah. Exactly. No, it's sophisticated equipment, basically a laptop that is next to an analyzer box that has an umbilical cord that attaches to a mask that collects somebody's respirations. And we could do that as we were ramping somebody up to their maximum intensity, and that would show them heart rate zones, VO2 max, fat oxidation in lots of, again, different intensities. And also what you mentioned, basal metabolic rate or resting metabolic rate. Come in early in the morning, lay down in a dark room, in a chair. We lay you back, put the mask on, you breathe in and out, and that tells us during the test, when we extrapolate it to 24 hours, approximately how many calories your body is burning. So essentially, like when we were starting out, we would, use the calories in, calories out formula and say like, okay, you're burning 1,500 calories at baseline. You might burn another 500 calories in your day to day. Maybe you work out 500 calories a day. If you eat 2,500 calories, those things even out. If you want to lose weight, maybe, exercise another 250 calories and then diet another 250 calories. That creates a deficit delta.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. In a week, that's 3,500 calories, which is 1 pound. And so you just do that for as many weeks as you have pounds to lose, and you will be fine and lose weight and all that stuff. And
that's pretty savvy.
It was savvy, and it never worked.
Seems like a nice way to do it.
It
never worked.
Funny. Yeah, that's pretty funny because we're told that, like, even having them lay down in the dark to get that resting, right? The idea is like we have more lean muscle mass. We're going to be metabolizing more calories while we're laying there.
Yeah, exactly. So to say it didn't work wasn't that the machine wasn't giving you accurate data, because it was. So for example, exactly what you said, Tom, if your body composition was more muscle than it was fat, well, you're going to be burning more calories all the time. And we might see that your metabolic rate might be higher than expected. If you're a chronic dieter or an over-exerciser, you might note that the number is way lower than you would have expected. And so for example, like I tested one woman right after she'd been booted off the Biggest Loser contest. And after several weeks or months or however long it was of amazing stories of like 1,200 calories a day in the diet and exercising 6 hours a day. Her metabolic rate average should have been about 2,000 calories, and we measured it about 1,000 calories. So you can just crush your own metabolic
So she pretty
rate.
much destroyed her own metabolism.
Yeah, which matches up perfectly with the study they did in 2016 with Biggest Loser contestants, where they found that most of the contestants had gained back a significant amount of weight, but also their metabolic rate had remained suppressed even that many years after doing a contest. It was like 6 years.
Do they have an idea why?
Well, it's that calorie deficit. And so when you are just basing yourself on calories and you're exercising this much and you're eating much lower, you're going to create a deficit, and that's going to work as your body's losing weight. But the problem is most people know of weight loss as like the first week they lose a pound, the second week they lose a half a pound, the third week they hardly lose anything. And they're noticing over time that their cravings are going up, their energy is going down, they feel lethargic, they feel cold. Temperature wise is a really easy sign. Like if you see a woman, in the summertime wearing a jacket, chances are, again, she's a chronic dieter or somebody who's over exercising. Your body will adjust its metabolic rate to what you're doing. And so simply putting somebody in a caloric restriction, like that works temporarily, but when you suppress the metabolic rate and then your cravings are so high that you go back to overeating, you just created the perfect weight gain scenario. You just created your own weight gain on the back end. And the number of times you repeat it, the worse and worse and worse it gets. So again, to say like the metabolic cart readings were great and they helped us understand what was going on, but the advice that we were giving people to restrict calories and just go exercise, that's what didn't work. But it was great because we could just sit there and say, oh, well, you didn't follow the advice. You didn't count your calories accurately enough. You didn't, exercise enough like we told you. So
Yeah. So Casey, then what are your thoughts about IF or even extended fasting?
Okay, so this is where I got my mind blown. So
all right.
This was bananas to me, and it took me a long time to figure out what was going on. So more than the overall calorie number that we were using in the beginning, over time, what we found where people get better results is let's not worry so much about the calorie number. That's important, and we want you to increase your metabolic rate, so you're just burning more calories all the time. But it's that other number, and teaching people how to burn fat as fuel, which got people the best results. Like for me as a cyclist, when I was cycling and performing in races or whatever, I was burning so many carbohydrates that I'd have to flood myself with carbohydrates during my exercise. And you take in the sugary drinks and the goos and the gels, and your stomach fucking hurts, and you have diarrhea and all kinds of crazy shit. When I taught myself that rather than use carbohydrates as fuel, I can use fat as fuel, we have so many tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of calories of fat on the body that now I can go out on a ride completely fasted, and I could go 2-3 hours and never bonk and not need any kind of energy. Like, for example, like I'm in the fasted state now. I'm going to go play an ice hockey game right after this for an hour and a half, very glycolytic, high intensity. I'll do the whole thing fasted, not be hungry, and not have any drop off in energy at all. So the thing that we were noticing is if you were changing the diet, you'd start to burn more fat. And we also noticed that if you did that, your metabolic rate might be a few hundred calories higher than normal. But it was fasting, man. I'm telling you, like it was like 2019. I had a guy come in. He had just started intermittent fasting. It was starting to get more popular. His metabolic rate based on a calculation should have been about 1,950 calories, about 2,000 calories, somewhere in there. And we tested him, and not only was his fat burn rate very, very high, and he was losing quite a bit of fat at the time, but also his metabolic rate came back in a resting state at like 2,600 calories. And I was like, holy shit, man, you're burning tons of calories and tons of energy. This looks really good. But now 2,600 calories really should be the minimum number of calories you should eat, because we knew that if you underate what you were doing at rest, you would drop it. And the guy looks at me and he's like, well, what do you want me to eat? Like, I've changed my diet. I can't eat that many calories anymore unless I go back to drinking soda and eating Twinkies. And I'm like,
jamming them in.
Right. So why is it that somebody could be eating less calories, calorie depriving themselves, and their metabolic rate is lower, yet somebody doing the same thing, but they're fasting, they're going a longer amount of time without eating, their metabolic rates higher? I tested it over and over and over again. I couldn't figure out why there was such a big difference between the two groups. And based on the work that I've read at the time of Dr. Jason Fung and how fasting worked, fasting allows you access to your stored fat cells. And once your body is good at burning fat, there's no need to start burning less. Your body speeds up and says, oh, wow, we had tons of this energy on the body already. Let's use it. Let's get it out of here. We don't like to carry extra fat anyway. We just stored it for this exact occasion, and the metabolic rate goes higher. And so that was such a cool finding and really changed the way we approached how to, guide people on different lifestyle things. Fasting, to me, once you're adapted to burning fat and burning your own fat, is one of the easiest ways that you can improve health in so many different ways, including metabolic rate. Like I know people, including myself, eat once or twice a day, can go, 24 hours quite easily without any food. And I feel warm and energetic. If I get hungry, it's just a little rumble in my tummy and that's about it. Like energy's still good. I don't need to eat between clients like I used to. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, that broke my brain to try to understand at first. It was hard.
Let me ask you something, because I've done a bunch of Ironman, a bunch of marathons, a bunch of more centuries than I can count. But when I was at sort of peak, and I'm always a better living through science guy. I mean, I'm co-hosting a podcast about fucking with your body. I mean, obviously I'm not interested in my brother, by converse, when he got me kind of into the Ironman thing, and I did a relay the first year and he did the full, and I'm just sitting there watching his training over the months, and it was like 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week. I'm like, fuck, dude, like you are like just absolutely like killing it. And I was like, this is great. This guy's exercising like 30 hours a week. Well, fast forward a year or two, I'm now in my second, third Ironman, and I'm like, you know what? This was right when Bulletproof was taken off, and like the whole can we get MCT oil across the blood-brain barrier? And by the way, I don't know the fucking science on that shit, but the actual practicality for Matt Hampton was like fucking rocket fuel. I had never performed better in my entire life than when I was on there, and I only stopped because of a practicality reason, like carrying an immersion blender with you everywhere you went and fucking
not the easiest.
Yeah, it's like it just got to be a pain in the ass. But here's my question: like, what's the cycle of training that? Because as you were talking, I'm like, fuck, I did that. When I would go on, like, my training schedule is whatever during the week, but on the weekends I would do like these aggrandizing run and then come back down, so a pyramid type schedule. And when I was getting into that double digit numbers, right? So I'm going out on a 10-mile run, the next week a 12-mile run, the next week a 14-mile run. Increasingly, I wanted to, at a gut level, do that fasted because I infinitely felt better. And the more I did it, the more I craved it, and the more like the idea. And I'd have various running partners, and they're like, oh, do you want to grab a muffin beforehand? I'm like, fuck no, I don't want anything. They're like, what about coffee? I'm like, I could drink half a cup of coffee just to kind of get the dust out of my eyes, but like, I don't want anything else, right? Like and that 90-minute number was sort of my threshold, right? Like, if I'm going to be exercising anything less than 90 minutes, I absolutely want nothing in my stomach. If it was going to be over 90 minutes, I started bringing, I use Perpetuum, which is a medium chain, and it broke down a little slower. So I've been told, again, I'm not sure the biology of it, but rather than like their lower end product, which is Heat or God forbid Gatorade, don't use the G word at an Ironman, they'll fucking, but like those things broke down too fast. And it's funny because once I started like playing with this formula, I'm like, this is the only formula that works. Like everything else is sort of like weirdly derivative and almost like misunderstood derivative, right? Like it's not, just doesn't work, right? So when does that cycle, like, talk me through, like, why was I experiencing that? I'm curious because it seems to be what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a great question. I love that you asked it. So let's start with, the 90-minute thing. We store two different major fuel sources in the body. As humans, we're very inefficient at using protein. We haven't really been carnivores in our evolution until like the last 2.5 million years, when we switched from eating mostly fruit as primates to kind of switching over and eating more meat and fat to go along with that. So we're not well adapted like a carnivore that's been carnivore for millions and millions of years. Like a cat can eat, 70, 80% protein and be totally fine, where we're constrained at about 30 to 40% protein. So we need to get our energy from either fat or carbohydrates. And we had to make a choice as a species which one we were going to go towards. And we went more towards the fat. And so our bodies as humans, we're really good at storing fat. And you have, again, tens of thousands of calories of fat stored on your body. Even people that are extremely lean, Tour de France athletes, they could not eat for a few days and they would still live because they still have a bit of fat on them. And we store fat so efficiently. And 1 gram of fat is 9 calories of energy. So that's quite a lot of energy that we can store as far as fat goes. With carbohydrates as a fuel source, is the other fuel that we can store. We're extremely limited on the amount of carbohydrates that we have. So most people don't realize, like, circulating in your blood, you have 1 teaspoon for your 5 liters of blood that's circulating around. It's a teeny tiny amount. And if that goes to like a teaspoon and a half, you're going to be like a raging type 2 diabetic. That's how tightly regulated we manage our blood sugar. You store also some the storage form of sugar, glucose, and glycogen in the liver and some in the muscles. But that's really limited. And for most people, for most men, that's going to be about 2,000 calories. For most females, just based on muscle mass, that's going to be closer to 1,500 calories. And so, for example, if you were doing exercise and you were, I was measuring you using the metabolic cart, and I found out that, at a certain heart rate range, say you're running around at 150, maybe you're burning 1,000 calories an hour, but 80% of those calories are coming from carbohydrates. That might be you burning 800 calories of carbohydrates every single hour. That's a finite energy source. Remember that you start out with 2,000 calories, and that's best case, only if that's like completely topped off. If you slept, started fasted, maybe that's a little bit lower. So it's just kind of a math game of like, when are you going to do what most endurance athletes experience, which is bonking? When you're going to hit the wall, run out of energy. So your strategies are, okay, well, I need to keep that energy level topped off so I can push that bonk effect back a little bit. So, some people choose different carbohydrate sources, some more complex. You mentioned Perpetuum or, Smart Starch, or Generation UCAN is another product that's a very complex carbohydrate that breaks down very slowly. You could do it also with the G-Word Gatorade and do it with lots of sugar that breaks down more quickly to give you that fast energy. But eventually, again, you're going to start running out of energy. If we switch and say, okay, in the off season, for example, let's ease off your training. Let's train less. You probably would be doing that anyway, as you mentioned, that pyramid. Let's also change the diet and let's shift it towards fats, and let's shift it greatly away from carbohydrates, and let's train up that fat burning engine. Well, now you just switched from an energy source that's finite and is going to run out to another energy source that is seemingly infinite. It doesn't run out very easily. If at that same intensity next year, you're burning 80% of your calories from fat, now you're only burning 200 calories an hour from carbohydrates. And you can work up your performance and get better and better doing that. Now you're not going to easily run out of that energy source. You can go further and further and further and further without taking in nearly as much fuel, and you never bonk. So,
it's funny that you should say that, because I would do supplementation the day before a long run of like a teaspoon of MCT oil straight, or a teaspoon of coconut oil, like the night before. And again, I don't know if the biology worked out, but it just seemed to prime me up for the next day. And I know, like, when I got a lot of this early on from like, who was the CrossFit fitness guy? Ryan, big dude, Kelly Starrett, right?
Oh, yeah.
When back in the day when he wrote his CrossFit fitness book, which was really an elite endurance athlete training CrossFit style, those guys would eat basically forget the goose or the Perpetuum, and I'm a Stinger guy, which is essentially just honey with some other stuff in it, but like they would eat like avocados dipped in MCT oil as like at a race. I'm like, are you okay? That's a little intense for me. Like I can't do that necessarily. But these guys must have been onto a similar trajectory. Because,
exactly. So the oils you're talking about, MCT oil comes from coconut oil. So MCT contains coconut. The molecules are called C8 and C10. These are very ketogenic types of fats in the body. So when you put them in the body, they go to the liver, and the liver must burn them. It can't store them. So it's basically a free energy source, as the liver converts those fats into ketones and fuels the body with this free energy source that can't be stored. Your heart loves ketones. It's part of the reason why you never hear of anybody getting heart cancer. Like, nobody gets heart cancer because the heart will preferentially use ketones, which is really anti-inflammatory kind of a fuel source. The brain, the muscles. It's the reason why Tour de France teams literally will buy hundreds of thousands of dollars of ketone esters to take with them to the tour. And even though these guys are eating lots of carbohydrates, their water bottle bottles literally cost like $100 with ketones, and they just chug these things because it's just free energy. It's just an energy source that the body has to use. So an MCT oil is like a precursor to ketones, or you can take what we call exogenous ketones or ketones outside of the body. And again, it's just free energy. The body has to use it as an energy source. And so that's why it can give that performance kind of a boost for people. Or you can do it with your diet and be in some form of ketosis by, eating a low amount of carbohydrates, eating some amount of fat, doing intermittent fasting. That kind of thing will just put you in a ketogenic state where you're just generating your own ketones all the time.
No, honestly, everybody wants to kind of like pair these things together, right? So you're doing, IF with, a high ketogenic diet, and then that's where we see the most benefits. Or is there a limit here? Is there too much of a good thing? I think if I haven't seen the limit yet. If there is a limit, I'm not sure we can reach it. I'll give you an example. I just read a study that was all about we had two groups and they were on some healthy diet, and the intermittent fasting group, and there was just a change your diet to a healthy, quote unquote, healthy diet, which is, fruits, vegetables, lean protein, grains. I debate whether all of that is healthy or not. But anyway, they showed that the intermittent fasting group had better results, but they had also gastrointestinal complaints. They said that it felt not great in their stomach. And it's okay, well, if you're eating a higher carbohydrate diet and you're fasting, you're just going to be super hungry when you're fasting. I used to fast as part of the religion I was brought up in. We would do a fast every month for 24 hours. And dude, the one day you did it was miserable. And then you would just spend the next 29 days being miserable about having to do it again in the future. It sucked. Now that I changed my diet and I'm eating more fats and proteins and excluding a lot of the carbohydrates, for me to go 24 hours without any food is really, really easy. I don't have any gastrointestinal problem. Gut feels great. So, you kind of want to pair those two together, because if you're not fully, satiated from your meals, to then become not hungry, to then fast in a way that's really effortless, that's totally different than eating a mixed meal, including carbohydrates in the diet, and then trying to intermittent fast. God bless. Good luck. You're going to have a tough time. You're going to be really hungry and cranky. You're probably not going to be successful fasting. Yeah. We had that one. We had those two chiros that do a metabolic reset.
I was going to bring that up.
One of the things they talk about. So it seems like they're doing some kind of reset fast or something, right? And then they move you to a more ketogenic diet. But then they had an interesting approach that I hadn't heard too much before, where they're talking about reintroducing carbohydrates almost in an Atkins-like way. I mean, I'm sure they're more savvy than even the research that Atkins did. But they said when you are balanced, quote unquote, you can burn either. You shouldn't have a problem. And do you see that as well, where people reintroduce carbs and then that's not an issue anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Dr. Atkins, oddly enough, he called a lot of balls and strikes, man. He got a lot of things right in the 70s. And part of what he would do is take people down really strict, and then he'd reintroduce carbohydrates to people, and you could kind of live in whatever level of carbohydrate you could really tolerate. So yes, we call that metabolic flexibility, where the body should be in a state where it can burn fat as fuel, it can use ketones as fuel, it can also use carbohydrates as fuel. And it can switch really easily between those two things. The problem is carbohydrates on the land where we have evolved, where we've been, even in very lush environments, are exceedingly, exceedingly rare. They're very seasonal. They're very rare. I can go outside right now. It's the end of July at the time of this recording. I live in a very temperate climate. There's an enormous variety of plants and shrubs and trees. There is no food for me that comes from plants. There just isn't right now. Now, in a few weeks, there might be a tree here and there that has maybe some apples. If it's natural, they're going to be small apples. I'm competing with other rodents and birds and whatever to get at these fruits and vegetables and things that are growing that I could eat. But they're not very common. They're really small and they're very seasonal. So
and you're not eating a pound in one sitting either.
That's right. Yeah. Exactly. Or if you did, again, it would be so temporary that, you'd eat all the carbohydrate. They would trigger insulin. Insulin is a storage hormone that says, okay, we've got all this sugar. Let's store this away. Let's stuff this into fat cells. And then winter would come at some point for most of us. And it's okay, well, I don't have fruits and vegetables. I may have developed some technology to try to store them and save them, maybe, apples in a barrel, and maybe that lasted a few months, or maybe some tubers. But again, that runs out. And then you have to switch back to burning fat as a fuel source. And good thing you stored it when you could. because that's exactly what you want to use fat for. The problem is we live in a world where, you know, we've invented refrigeration and transportation, and most people don't realize when they buy an apple at a store, it's been picked for over a year. Like the average age of an apple is like 14, 15 months by the time you get it at the store.
That's
and most
fucking
people,
wild. Seriously, I didn't.
Oh my god!
They call them birthday apples in the industry because they're already a year old, and whatever they do to like whatever waxes they use or what they store them in silos and pumped with chemicals and then get transported. Like the dude in Sprouts didn't just go pick your apple like while you were cruising around the store and ordering it. This came from a different place in the world, and we're transported and stored and all this stuff. And like people don't give second thought to like, yeah, I can go to Toronto and eat all the mangoes I want in March, and that's so normal for us now. We don't consider it.
Right.
And then again, we're talking about like fruit. So that's arguably like a really healthy thing, let alone all the sugar that we refine and ship everywhere very cheaply. We've got refined grains. We make food that is very shelf stable. We introduced seed oils into our diet starting in 1911, largely with the invention of Crisco. So now we're
it's funny. The metabolic guys are one of their big things is elimination of seed oils entirely.
But I don't, you hear that so much, right? That's a huge thing. And even they're even playing with what short chain amino acids. They're not even doing
they do switch
MCT.
You over to that.
They're going short.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah. I would just say on the seed oils, look up the show How It's Made. It was a great show back like 10, 15 years ago. Basketballs and bicycles and all that stuff.
I fucking love that show.
Look up How It's Made canola oil and you'll see how vegetable oil is made, which ironically, next time you're at the store also, just cruise where you see all the vegetable oils and just marvel at the fact that of all these bottles of golden oil that you see that are called vegetable oil, not one single fucking drop comes from vegetables. It's all coming from seeds. We call it vegetable oils. Funny. But yeah, you'll watch this video and you see this nasty shit that comes off of these seeds that they have to press, they have to deodorize because it stinks to high heaven, they have to use a chemical extraction using hexane, they then have to cook it at such high temperatures. But this is a polyunsaturated oil that is extremely fragile to oxidation. When you expose it to things like light, heat, and air, these fats oxidize and cause inflammation inside the body. That's exactly what they're designed to do. They've got multiple double bonds that react with oxygen and cause issues. And we're now taking these oils, heating them up to high temperatures, cooking with them, frying with them, all this bullshit. They create enormous amounts of damage inside the body. Seed oils are arguably more toxic than the amount of sugar and refined grains that we're eating.
Well, I'm about to go on this 5-week journey with it.
One with the you fry the carbs in the fry.
Yeah.
That's right. You get them both. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
That's a delicious meal.
Well, I'm trying to. I'm going to try to go down this little rabbit hole with them, but I'm curious because their claim is that it resets what they call their metabolic thermostat. They're like, look, we can turn your thermostat way down where it's at because you're probably doing a bunch of shit you shouldn't be.
Yeah,
even if you're healthy. Like even if you're healthy.
Yeah, and I mean, this guy, to their credit, I mean, one guy had like what
stage 4 lymphatic
cancer.
Metastasized cancer.
Yeah. So it's
and he went to
remarkable.
Spain. And the Spanish doctor, we don't know what he did because we haven't cracked this nut yet. But
we're checking out their website. We're
but
doing
he rolled back.
Snooping.
Yeah, he rolled back a stage 4 cancer, from what I can tell, largely on a dietary pivot, right?
Yeah.
Like it basically said, we're going to take all the shit that's keeping your body from getting healthy. It wants to get healthy. Like your body wants to be healthy.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so let's take out hyperbole and let's take out marketing and let's take out, all that stuff. I think where I'm curious specifically around the show, but just myself in general is like, how much truth is there to that? And
I hear stories like that all the time.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. No. So the metabolic reset would be like you live in a world where carbohydrate, sugar should be exceedingly rare, but you have access to it 365 days out of the year. Most, I was hanging out with family a few weeks ago with my in-laws, and these toddlers are waking up and the first thing in their hand for breakfast is like Rice Krispie treats. Like you live in a world where that's our reality. So a reset would be, let's eliminate that. Maybe let's go very, very low carbohydrate for a time, or do what I did, which is start a carnivore diet where you're exclusive eating meat.
Yeah. I want to talk to you about that too.
Yeah.
Come back to that.
Try that. See how that goes. And then over time, you can reintroduce things and see how you do on certain foods. I found for me that once I went carnivore, it was easy for me to stay carnivore. And when I included more sugar in the diet, my anxiety would come back and I would have sleep issues and I just didn't like it as much. So it's easy for me just to stay strict on a carnivore diet. So I've been doing that for 5.5 years now. My performance is fine for cycling and hockey and all these different things I love to do. With cancer, I hear these stories all the time. It's not controversial. We knew 100 years ago that cancer cells grow and proliferate way more than they should. And it ends up being detrimental for cancer because it kills itself, right? But we knew 100 years ago, Otto Warburg, and he was actually a gay Jew in Germany that they kept alive during World War II. That's how important his research was. He understood that the cancer cells, even in the presence of oxygen, are not metabolizing oxygen, and they couldn't figure out why. Cancer cells revert back to an ancient form of metabolism, which is fermentation. They ferment for energy, and it's really inefficient. And so then you think like, okay, well, what would starve the cancer cells? And it's like, okay, cancer fuels on glucose and glutamine. So if we could eliminate glucose and we could maybe find some way to like block glutamine temporarily, like you need it, but you could also knock it down a little bit with different drugs, which are still illegal in the United States. Unfortunately, you can get the cancer cell to shrink. You're cutting off all its energy source. Then you could do something like a surgery, get it out of there, not necessarily need, chemotherapy or radiation. I've interviewed several people on my podcast who have been, stage 4, stage 5. One guy had, he's been diagnosed with a glioblastoma. It's been 10 years and he had like a few months to live, a few months extended if he did the radiation and chemotherapy. He found some of these controversial ideas and decided to try it. And he's on 10 years now of no cancer therapy and he's still alive. He's got to be careful.
One of my neighbors has a glioblastoma, and the first thing, and he's at Hopkins because Tom and I are both in Baltimore. So Hopkins, arguably the best treatment on the planet.
Yep.
First thing they did, fucking hardcore, no fucking compromise ketogenic diet day one.
Oh,
like,
wow.
Wow. They're starting to get savvy to it.
Don't fuck with it. Don't change this. It's a chemistry question. You don't sneak a Tootsie Roll. Don't fucking take an M&M.
You're not fucking around anymore.
Like, no, like this is like, and even, for what it's worth, the Metabolic guys, they said the same thing. They're like, listen, this is a 5-week program and I need your undivided attention. This is a chemistry problem. This is not a diet. It's not a lifestyle. It's a 5-week program that you need to do exactly. Letter of the law. Don't fuck with it. He goes, because if you do, and you just get weak and you pop a Tootsie Roll, we got to start you over. Like it's got to restart.
I've interviewed people who have reversed Alzheimer's and dementia. I know people who are bipolar that no longer have symptoms of bipolar anymore. They're off of all medications. Yeah, it's nice to like lose fat and lose weight and not feel that hungry anymore. But now, what you're talking about there is you're not fucking around anymore. You have to be strict unless you want your epilepsy to come back. If you really want to knock down cancer, this is the way you can do this. It gives you a really good shot. But the problem is the way one cancer expert explained it to me, Dr. Thomas Seyfried, he's out of Boston. He said the problem is cancer is a revenue generating disease. So you make money in the hospital system when they give you chemotherapy and radiation. The problem is if I give you metabolic therapy, it might at the very least be an adjunct. It might help you deal with chemotherapy a little bit better and come out of it way better. Like I was front row seat to watching my mom just wither away 7.5 years that she had been diagnosed with breast cancer at age 38, 39. She passed away at age 46 and like all these treatments and the chemotherapy. She couldn't even get radiation anymore because she'd had like a lifetime of radiation that she could receive. And when she would do her chemo treatments, we would bring her the big Jamba juices and like Starbucks had just opened up in the Salt Lake Valley. So where I live, like it's like kind of Mormons don't drink coffee, and so it was this kind of like taboo place that opened and was selling coffee. We'd get the apple cider drinks and bring it to her during her chemotherapy treatments. It's like, why didn't we just grab a can of gasoline and throw it directly on the fire to fuel this cancer growth?
Right.
If we would have done, would have been aware of the opposite, we could have at least said, okay, let's use some of these tools. Sure, if you want to go the conventional route, this can at least help as an adjunct at the very least. But let's get this tumor size down. If nothing else, let's make it shrink a little bit and have it become less of a problem. And that's again where fasting, a really cool benefit of fasting is something called autophagy, which is literally autophagy. Eat yourself. Your body is recycling things that it doesn't need, old junky proteins, that kind of thing. So I know, again, a lot of people...
It's funny, I take a senolytic to promote autophagy.
Oh, interesting.
And I take it, take it, it's a 2-day cycle once a month.
Okay.
That's not...
Neurohacker Collector has
then, right?
It's a Qualia product, which is great because I take Qualia Life for like years now, and I swear to God, that stuff, like... I mean, it's a huge B complex, so it's a little hard to see what the ATP or mitochondrial level is doing.
Sure.
Except for the fact that I made it through COVID didn't get sick once. Like,
Awesome.
And I'm not saying it's a COVID cure, but I am saying that like if you're looking at your health from the mitochondria level up,
Yep.
and you're paying attention to this, right? Like,
Yep.
It's not one thing that I mean, at least where my evolving opinion is it's not any one thing. And I know Tom talked about this earlier. Yeah. Everybody wants that one thing. I want this diet that'll make me lose 50
and they want
pounds.
it to be a pill, and they don't want to have to do anything. They don't want to have to change who they are or what they're doing on the daily.
Yeah. You know? And my wife has got a huge carbohydrate. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sarah's got a huge carbohydrate addiction, and she's like, she loves sugar.
It is addiction.
And I keep telling her, she goes, it's not fair. I said,
it's not.
This word you're using is weird, right? Like the word you're using isn't right. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make sense because it's not a fair thing. Like, I don't have 1% body fat and a giant pecs. Like, can I say that's not fair? Or do I just say that's not reality for me based on what I'm willing to do?
Good point.
To do that, right? Like, if I wanted to, I could hire a guy like you and say, hey, I want to look like this. How do I do that? And you can
don't let me eat anything I'm not allowed to eat. Make me move the right amount away. Yeah, you know,
make me do the things. Yeah, but I'm not willing to do that. So like, I can't then turn around and be like, well, how dare the universe not grant me these giant pecs? Like, I'm doing nothing to promote that, right?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, like, this is a molecule. It is addictive. I believe I'm a sugar addict as well. I always thought I could moderate it, and I really can't. Imagine being a cocaine addict, but, you know, rather than being a cocaine addict, you know, here in the Salt Lake Valley, like, it's around me, I'm sure, but I can't find it at 40 years old. What the fuck am I going to do?
Right.
Imagine being a cocaine addict where you can get cocaine at the gas station or the grocery store or the hardware store. You can get cocaine from your neighbor's kid down the street who's selling it for $3 in a jar during, you know, summertime. And when you're sad, you can have some cocaine. And when you're happy to celebrate, you can have some cocaine. It's like that. I you know, the last time that I decided to go off my diet and decided to eat a pie. I bought a pie and had a bit and had a bit and had a bit. And it was really good. And then I had a bit more and I was like, okay, I'm good. Let me just set this down. So I had a few more bites and half of it was gone. I'm like, okay, that's enough. So I had a few more bites.
Well, we've already come halfway. We might as well finish.
If I just get rid of it, it won't be tempting anymore.
The whole fucking thing. I know.
I get it, man.
I mean, no. It's the same way, but you know, it's so back to the sort of cancer type thing, right? Like, I mean, I think the thing about this food and the fasting and all the stuff we've been talking about that sort of drives me crazy at a macro level and at a local level with just me. I'm the same way. I can't just listen to this, right? I don't know why, but like right now I'm not training for a race. So I'm like not paying attention to these things. And I woke up this morning and I'm on a call and I see a roast beef and Swiss sandwich sitting there from yesterday that was in the fridge. And I'm like, you know, I'm a little peckish. I could eat that. And I ate a sandwich. But meanwhile, like, it wasn't because I had to eat a sandwich. It's because I saw it. I reacted. I mindlessly engaged. I ate it. Now, look, it's a roast beef sandwich. It's not, you know, a pie, but at the same time, it's on bread. It's probably, the oil that they put on the dressing is probably a seed oil. Like, there's just like a couple micro infractions here that I probably could have lived without. But like, multiply that over a lifetime, right? And like, that's a fucking lot of micro infractions, right? Like, it's like a lot.
You smoke one cigarette. Is that the problem? Like, it's not great, but you can smoke one cigarette. You're not going to die. These diseases that we know as, you know, chronic metabolic diseases that we're all facing, diseases of modern civilization, they're hard to study. And, you know, places like the American Diabetes Association, so we don't know what causes insulin resistance. It's so complicated. Like, really? Or is it a lifetime of eating these foods that are so exceedingly rare in nature that we're concentrating and eating all day, every day for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and then we're dealing with the manifestations later. So it's tough. It's again, some people might find, you know, earlier, like we were talking about, like maybe they have a reset. Let's get the body burning fat again. Most people just have no ability to burn fat because they're eating so many carbohydrates. Insulin is storing energy and is suppressing the burning of fat. Let's flip that. Let's get insulin low for a little while. Let's take away carbohydrates. Let's feed you on fat and protein, excuse me. Let the body start burning fat. And then, try reintroducing more carbohydrates. Keep them lower than you had before and see how you feel. Do you still think clearly? Do you have good energy? Are you, full from your meals and you can do intermittent fasting effortlessly? Or are you getting hungry again? Are you you overeating? Are you craving things? For me, I always wanted to be a moderator, and I promote that with my clients, and I'm not a moderator. I have to abstain. It's easier for me to just say, you know what?
Right.
This is not food for me. Fruit, like, for a lot of people, they can have fruit and it's totally fine. For me, I eat fruit and I get really, really hungry 20 to 30 minutes later. And when I get that hungry, I'm not wanting fruit anymore. I want a candy bar. It's just easier for me to say, like, I don't need it. I don't want it. Let me just not do it. Let me just focus on fats and proteins. And I feel great by doing it. So people need to assess where they are individually. And you're right. Like, is that sandwich the worst decision ever? Like, no, there might be something you have to like burn off afterwards, but it's just when you compound that, like you mentioned, like all day, every day, decades and decades. Now we're having problems.
Yeah.
And we actually are going to have a woman on who looks at self through the lens of psychedelic, evolution. And one concept that she brought up that was super fascinating, and it relates to what we're talking about, is a lost sense of interoception that nobody has anymore, right? Like, and this inability to look inward and sort of make those, forget about prescriptions for future tense, but no presence or interoceptive, like, look at present tense.
Wow.
Right. And say, like, presently I ate this apple pie from McDonald's and I feel like dog shit. Like, why do I feel like dog shit? Did I just have a long day? And it's funny when you start paying attention, because we sort of freely anesthetize ourselves to sort of a reality that literally just happened. Dude, you just went to McDonald's, you just bought a pie, you just ate it, and 20 minutes later, you're telling me, like, I feel like shit and I don't know why. Well, really? This isn't rocket science, man. We're not curing cancer here. This is a plus B equals C situation. Like, and even that level of basics, and that's not to mention any of the shit you're talking about, which is like, oh, let me try to like train my body to eat fat, and then I'll reintroduce carbs because I need to be metabolically flexible. That level, I mean, we can't even get them past the McDonald's apple pie problem. We can't even. How do you even lay out a framework, a cognitive framework to understand
that's why this will never be mainstream. And, at the same token, we'll continue to see metabolic diseases on the rise. We'll keep seeing things that come from carrying excess body fat, insulin resistance. I mean, it's not making people money.
Yep.
That woman, who was that woman, that doctor 10 years ago? I can't remember her name. She had like wheelchair bound ALS, I think she had.
Terry Walls.
And she basically cured it by eating like a dinner plate filled with onions, beets, and lettuce. Like, it was like this crazy mathematical calculation, but it fucking worked.
Even she's doing a low carb diet now. She's still doing that.
I mean, her doing the math on this, and it was, I guess, like, we got lucky with her, right? Like, she studied this and then got it, and now could look at it from the inside out rather than the outside in.
Yeah.
And she basically did the math. She's like, all right, I need this amount of sulfur. How do I get sulfur in the most efficient way? Well, that's onions and garlic and blah, blah, blah. And she did the math and it worked. But like, she goes, the only one making any money on this equation is the grocery store. Like, I'm not, like, I'm eating a lot of shit. Like, and I saw the pictures. I mean, she would eat like, I mean, I don't know if you saw any of these pictures, but I mean, her meals were not only super calculated, but massive. But it was all
I think even Casey mentioned that, right? If we're restricting, if we're doing the IF and we're restricting carbs, the calorie, that number doesn't have to be, you're not pulling out the scale and measuring out, boneless, skinless chicken breast. I'm going to eat until I'm full, and then that's going to carry me until the next time that I eat.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. So lots of different ways to go low carb. I understand that Terry Walls did it, mostly like plant-based, and had a lot of those kinds of ingredients in her diet, which is, it's fine. I've hosted people on my show too that have reversed cancer and, mental disorders by doing a lot of like plant-based diets. I don't think that's the best way, but I think it's definitely a way that you can do it. But yeah, I think to address your point, like McDonald's apple pies taste that good. Like they're just that good. They're the perfect combination of sweet and savory and salty that they make these foods the maximum of those things so that you will eat
but
them.
There's literally food scientists that figure that out, right? So they know if you get the Big Mac and you get the fries, now you need the large Coke.
Chemistry.
Oh, you got the large Coke, you might as well have the apple pie. And
totally.
Look, we're going to make it easy for you. Just say number 5.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know, that is all intentional.
Yep.
That is not something a chain restaurant doesn't know.
Oh, yeah. No, they're very smart about that, and they have been for a long time. When smoking was falling out of favor, a lot of the marketing teams that were promoting smoking, they just moved to the food industry and just ran the same play that they were doing with smoking. So no different.
It's the same play.
It's the same play. That's what they do.
And it's funny. What was that movie where the guy was a cigarette salesman and then moved over to the cell phone industry? And he basically was like, "Oh, I know how to do this." Like it was basically like, "No, cell phones are safe." Yeah. Oh God, what was his name? It was a movie about a guy who sold cigarettes. Like he worked for tobacco, and then when it fell out of favor, he just moved over to selling cell phones.
I don't
and it
know
was
this
sort of
movie,
a little,
man, but
it was a tongue in
I
cheek.
look this up.
It was like a tongue-in-cheek sort of like, hey, you know, the movie wasn't about cell phones. It was about the cigarette industry.
Yeah.
But they sort of took a jab at like the sort of unregulated, unknown nature of the cell phone industry. One
That's cool.
step further.
You know,
Which, by the way,
funny. It's another addiction, you know?
it is.
Right.
And I know a guy who had a stage 4 cancer in his jaw and side of his face that the doctors are like, there's almost nothing we can find that doesn't say this was from your cell phone. And he was back in the 80s and early 90s.
Oh,
I only know one
phone was an actual, like, you know,
just a radiating device. Yeah, that was
just
basic.
a brick of radiation.
And he was on it like 8-10 hours a day. And he was
God.
basically like, yeah. And the doctors are like, well, we figured this out. Wasn't very hard. You've got this cancer device strapped to your face for 8 hours a day.
Great.
Yeah, like we're not unclear. We're all good. Yeah.
I just saw a commercial from like the 90s. Somebody posted to Instagram where it was the loop over the head and it would connect the phone. So it showed people with like the brick phone doing like, like cooking, and they were able to type as they were talking on the phone. Like what a convenience this was.
What a convenience.
Amazing. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. And now I keep my ring is on airplane mode. I don't let that touch.
Yeah.
When I'm not using my watch, like I have it on now because I forgot to take it off. But like even anytime I'm not actually using it, I take that away. My phone, it's on speakerphone as much as I can. I get on my kids' ass about, Bluetooth headphones because they just sit there.
Wired.
Yeah, I mean, I try and like I'm not at my house right now, so I have my Bluetooth headphones right now. Normally, I have like a wired headphone for the same reason. It's like, and like if you, what was it, Mercola or not Mercola? Who's the other guy that did all the Bluetooth radiation studies? But some of that shit's outright terrifying,
scary,
right? Like you're like, I mean, you're like, what the fuck are we doing? Seriously, like, my 13-year-old who's still developing is getting radiated literally between her ears, like straight through her brain.
Bathed in it.
Not great.
It's not great.
Not
hey,
great.
before we get to the end, I did want to make sure we talked about Carnivore a little bit. To say that that this has been met with a flurry of opinions would be kind of understating.
Oh yeah,
like the Carnivore thing. I personally respond really well to it. It's a little bit hard for me to keep just because my family doesn't eat red meat, so it's a little hard to keep. But I do feel like my energy levels are quite a bit higher. My satiety levels are kind of different. Like I'm differently full.
Yep.
So I'm just curious, like, what got you into that, and sort of like why?
Yeah, when I started, discovering what I learned about the metabolic carts and the fasting and low carbohydrate diets, how to improve metabolism and all this stuff, you start getting into this world. I started getting really fascinated by it, and then started to hear stories. In particular, one doctor named Dr. Sean Baker. He was featured on Joe Rogan in 2018, I want to say. And this doctor's in his 50s, and he's PRing deadlifts and doing rowing competitions. And he's a medical doctor who's saying, like, all I do is eat ribeyes. I feel great. I don't even care what my blood says. I'm performing at a high level. And if people ask, this is something I recommend. And I thought it was so insane that I turned off the episode, and only until like last year or two did I ever go back and like listen to the rest of the episode. But if you're in the low carbohydrate space, you do learn about this certain subset of people that are not only doing low carbohydrate, but they're doing no carbohydrate. And they've been doing it for a long time, some of them. And so you get curious and go like, wait a second, what about fiber? What about, did they eat no vegetables? Like that makes no sense. And so I just, learned enough about it that I decided to try it. It was April of 2019. 2019. I gave it a 30-day trial, which is the way a lot of carnivore people start. And same as what you described. I felt really good. My energy improved. I was already pretty low carb. It was just me cutting out mostly the vegetables I was eating. And I remember it was about 10 to 14 days in where I realized that something stressful had happened. Somebody refunded all their personal training sessions that they bought from me, and I didn't wig out. I didn't spin in anxiety. I was very calm and like, oh, wow, that's cool. Yeah, God bless. Let's give you your money back and let me know if you need anything in the future. And reflecting on that, like my overall level of happiness was higher. My contentment was higher. Like I appreciated trees and birds and everything was just more beautiful. And I realized my brain was changing as I was giving it the most nutrient dense foods possible and eliminating foods that could potentially cause some harm in some people. So a carnivore diet is the ultimate diet where you are taking all of the plant foods that the planet offers, especially grasses. You're running them through animals, in particular ruminant animals where possible. They're animals that convert grass into fat. That's one thing a lot of people don't know is they see cows eating a bunch of grass and think they're running on carbohydrates. But as they're fermenting all of the grasses, the carbohydrates, they turn into short chain fatty acids. They run on fat just the way that we should. It's just that they have fermentation chambers and we don't. So if I eat the cow, then I'm eating the proteins and fats that cow converted from plants that I'm not able to do very well, but they are. And I get all the nutrients I need and I get nothing that I don't. One thing that most people are not willing to accept or understand, this is just called botany, okay? This is just botany. All plants contains toxins. All plants contain toxins. Now, we can detoxify them. Some have more than others. You can't just eat any tree, but fruit, you can have some and be fine because that's a low level of toxin. Or we're really cool as humans because we figured out how to ferment and sprout and, take wheat grasses and make them into sourdough. And we found and cook is a huge thing that we can do as humans. And that helps to detoxify the plants and open up some of the nutrients. We don't do that as much anymore. And we have this really entitled view of plants that we can just go out, breed plants to whatever our desires are and have them in any way that we like, whenever we like, all year round, without realizing that these plants have toxins and they don't want you to eat them just like we don't want to be eaten. And they have developed different defense mechanisms for not only us as humans, but also insects and small rodents to keep animals from eating them in this never-ending evolution arms race of plants becoming toxic and certain animals finding ways to detoxify certain plants. Again, we can do it, other animals can do it, but it's a tight range. You don't see, sharks not eating a normal shark diet. Turtles have whatever plants that turtles can eat, and that's about it. And so a carnivore diet just says, like, I'm not even going to mess with all the toxins in plants. I'm just going to focus on the safe and nutrient dense things that I get with meat, mostly beef or whatever ruminant animals you get. You can dabble in other things if you like. And it's really just, in my opinion, the normal human diet that we should be on. And yeah, again, having some plants seasonally or treating them with respect and understanding that there are things in here that could accumulate and be bad for me over time. One example is a plant toxin called oxalate. So mentally,
spinach is all over the map with this shit.
It's the one, that is the one plant food that I just tell everybody, like, the rest of it, if you want to eat it, just be careful. Don't have a lot. Spinach is the one that I say don't eat. It's not worth it for anybody. When you take in your mind, take a piece of spinach, a raw spinach leaf, chew it in your mouth and see what your mouthfeel is. Can you feel like what your mouth would kind of feel like, that grittiness? So those are oxalate crystals. So you're just basically chewing glass or chewing sandpaper. And that's the crystal form of oxalate that goes through and creates a lot of abrasions inside your gut. It's not great, but that's the better form versus the ionic form of oxalate, which then gets into the body very easily and starts to seek out minerals to chelate. So that's where it builds up in the joints and certain parts of the eyes. And it can this is the main component in kidney stones, for example. Like this is a toxin that comes from plants that if you have too much of it can cause severe problems. I deal with people like that all the time. So it's that and other toxins that, again, if people are being mindful and careful about the preparation, the seasonality, how they're treating the plants, what parts of the plants they're using, you can eat plants and be fine. But again, a carnivore diet just says, I don't want to mess with any of that. Let me just focus on the animal products, which are, again, safe, nutrient dense. There's nothing you don't get from animal products that you need from plants. Focus on that, and you can do that seemingly pretty well.
What's the sort of, you were talking about the fermentation capacity of a ruminant animal. I haven't heard this argument before. I mean, I know what you're talking about just from going to high school in America. Like you learn that shit in biology class at some point. But like what I didn't know is that we can't do that. But like I guess my question is like spinach, kale, like what, all these sort of like superfoods, avocados, blah, blah. You got all these things that we do kind of like phytochemicals and all these, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's a litany of things right there. If you're not eating any of the plant stuff, I mean, do any of those things, and we'll just say summarily the superfood ingredients, like did any of those make it through the digestion of an animal process?
They actually
Are they
do.
even in the meat?
Yeah, that's actually, I love the question. That's a great question. It would be an argument. I'm not fully sold on this, but it would be an argument more for grass-fed animals. There's a researcher who I've spoken with who's up at Utah State, about a 2-hour drive from here. He's from the Netherlands, and he studies how cows graze in different plants, and they have more chemicals in the meat itself, which can then get into us. It is debatable whether that's necessary or not, whether that's beneficial or not. We don't exactly know. I can tell you that I eat grain-fed meat. I have had like 0 fiber, 0 vegetables, like literally no vegetables. I haven't, like maybe a piece of fruit here and there when it's in season, but I'm like 5 years, man, like 5.5 years. I have not had any appreciable amount of vegetables, and my digestion's never been better. I feel way better at 40 than I did at 30. My mental capacity is awesome. My energy feels really good. I never get any of the niggling aches and pains that I used to. If I get really sore during a workout, the next day I feel like I didn't work out at all. And I'm eating like $10 ribeye steaks. It's like the easiest, the most simple.
Yeah. So that's a question then. What about, because one of the things that they talk about, and clearly I see you're trying to do grass-fed over that, but what about the hormones? What about, the pesticides that tend to get stored in animal fat? Are you it sounds right now that you're not that picky about the source of the protein. Like it's not necessarily a heritage pig or 100% grass-fed cow.
No,
Wagyu beef.
Yeah, we talk about this in the community all the time, and whether the treatment of the animal is better. I love what you said about the fat storage. That is where animals store fat, and I think it's more important with monogastric animals that only have one stomach. Pigs, chickens. You get into like our raising of pigs and chickens in this country is really poor, and their fats may accumulate more of the nasty shit that they're exposed to. Where in a cow that again is fermenting all its energy, it seems to be able to take in a wide array of lots of different fuels and still produce very high quality fats and proteins. I know several people who, again, debate this and say that it's better. In my personal opinion, after, investigating this for so long, if grass-fed is better for you, it might be like that much better for you. I don't think it makes any difference. I, again, buy steak when it's on sale, and I just eat whatever. Yeah. And I have not noticed any health issues whatsoever. So
now, Casey, have you done blood work? And that's the only, like, are you actually doing like something quantifiable? Like, because clearly how you feel is extremely important, but would you go and get, hey, make sure that everything's running right? Or you get your regular checkups and doing a full panel and everything's coming back cool?
Yeah, I saw earlier this year that Abbott Health, whatever, was offering like a free cholesterol test. And I'm like, oh, great. I want to see where my cholesterol is. And it's certainly high. I also have done a calcium artery score earlier this year at age 40. I wanted to see if I had any plaque, and I came back as a 0. Well, there's a lot of people in the community that I know that are fit what is called, it's a phenotype that's called lean mass hyperresponder. This is getting into cholesterol. So it's not everything that you're asking about, like a full panel, but basically,
that's okay. Yeah.
There's some people in this community that are lean and they're active. And what happens is all of their blood markers on a low carbohydrate diet get better. It's awesome. HDL goes up, triglycerides go down. They feel amazing. All these crazy things are improving. Save one number, and it's their LDL cholesterol. We call it the bad cholesterol. And it goes up. And it doesn't go up by 20 points or 40 points or into like the level of like, oh, you get a statin. No, I'm talking like double, triple, quadruple the amount of LDL cholesterol. 400, 500, 600. Extremely high LDL cholesterol, yet they're seeing all these health benefits and improvements. Who is to say that this level of cholesterol is damaging to you? So I'll give you a great example. I've got a friend, Robin. I met her through the community. She is bipolar. She's been bipolar most of her life, heavily medicated, mostly kind of like sedated through all her kids, like growing up, like really poor existence. She found a low carbohydrate diet through her husband who wanted to lose weight. She tried it, went very low carb, is very lean. She ended up feeling amazing amazing. She's off of all of her bipolar medications, but now she fits this phenotype where her LDL cholesterol is extremely high. So she can introduce carbohydrates. If she ate just a small amount of carbohydrates, her LDL cholesterol will go right back down to normal, but then her bipolar comes back. What do you do?
Yeah, fuck that.
If you're in that situation, what do you do? And
there's no middle of the road that is easy to to navigate. Yeah.
And if she introduced a statin, I'm curious, if she introduced a statin at that point, would it sort of prompt bipolar to come back? Like,
maybe. There's another guy in our community that just did a study last year where he ate the diet that makes him fit this phenotype. He runs with an LDL cholesterol in the 500s. He does it for gut health. Wow. He improved his gut health.
Fucking nuts, by the way.
It's nuts.
Like, Jesus Christ.
Think about that level, and also by time. So it's not just that the level is high, but it's also multiplied in
years.
milliliter years of how high the cholesterol is circulating everywhere. So he did a study where for several weeks, all he did was introduce one sleeve of Oreo cookies in his diet. His LDL cholesterol went from about 500 to the high 100s. He went back to baseline after the study, got his cholesterol even higher than it was before, took a statin. The statin only dropped it to like 375. So a statin was less effective lowering cholesterol than
that's
Oreos.
Wild.
Just to show, and he only did it to show that like this, there's an interesting model where, your LDL cholesterol can be really, really high, but is that necessarily a bad thing? And we've got another study in the community where we've taken people, they've been on a low carbohydrate diet for over 5 years. These people, average age, there's a group of 100 people, average age was in the mid 50s, 60 dudes, 40 females, and they have an average LDL cholesterol of 260. So double what it should be for a very, very long time. And they did really complicated heart scans, and the preliminary data from the first round of heart scans showed that of a 45 point calcium artery, really advanced like calcium artery score, there was one person in double digits. All of them, the rest of them were in single digits, and the majority of them were 0, meaning they had super high amounts of cholesterol.
But no calcified. Now, I would be curious to see, and I'm in this rabbit hole right now because of another guest we had on about the CT angiogram with the tracer, which actually does the other test, which is like the calcium test is great, but it only tests for calcified plaque, right? Like, so you're none of that soft plaque. So I would actually be curious to see. That is a very expensive test that's not covered. By the way, I'm fighting with my insurance company right now to get it covered.
Good luck.
I don't expect that they're going to win. I'm going to win, but I got to at least fight the fight. So far, the operators have been very sympathetic. I said, oh, by the way, Tom, and I didn't even tell you this. The reason they're denying it is because they deemed it not medically necessary. And I said, well, what does that mean? And they said, well, you have to have coronary artery disease to get the test. And I said, but you understand that I'm getting the test to prevent coronary artery disease. Yeah, and I'm like, and I have 2 different operators now I've talked to, and the second one that I talked to just like a couple days ago, she snickered real quick before I think she realized she was reminded that this phone call is being recorded. So she was like, but yes, that was right.
Dealing with those people on the phone is exactly why I hired a medical biller.
Right.
I just, why? Because I
can only imagine.
I literally at one point was screaming, patients on the table, up and down the office. I think I said, this is recorded, right? Yeah. And I said, and if I sound like an asshole, somebody's going to listen to this and review it, right? I go, all right, so here's what I hope. I hope your CEO has a light bulb out in his room. He gets up on the table, goes to change the light bulb, slips, falls out, hits his car on the way out the window. And while he's waiting for his treatment, the hospital is now arguing whether or not it's workers' comp, auto, or major med. And she's like, did you think about that? I go, no, that is how stupid this fucking system is.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of.
It's amazing.
You paid for 4 surgeries for this fucking patient.
Right.
And you won't give me $100 for a goddamn acupuncture treatment.
Oh, how about that fucking Galleri test? I'm taking this Galleri test. It's $1,000 test, but it tests for 57, I think, cancers through a blood test.
Oh, wow.
And it's not covered by insurance. And I had the same conversation. I said, so let me just get this straight. There's 57 or so cancers on here, and the number's getting more every month or year or whatever, right? And any one of these, if I found out on a test, it's likely going to be stage 2, 3, 4. Like, I'm not going to find it.
This is not early detection.
Like, this is not, and so what happens if I come to you with stage 4 pancreatic cancer? This shit gets expensive immediately. Day one, you're out gazillion dollars, right? If this $1,000 test gets it so that I find pancreatic cancer markers pre-stage 1, like,
which is almost never done.
Almost never done.
Cancer.
How much money does that save you as a company over the ecosystem? Billions and billions and billions of dollars when you add up everybody, right? Like, I mean, this almost feels like you should have it as a part of your physical. Like,
it should be mandatory.
You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any fucking sense. So what ends up happening is, like, I'm going to pay for it out of pocket, and hopefully fucking knocking on everything I can find, it comes back negative. But it's so maddening that this shit exists and we don't. So anyway, back to the question: are they doing those kind of tests, and is it like? Yeah.
It is CT angiogram that they're doing in this study. They are flying people out to Dr. Matthew Budoff. I believe he's at UCLA. So they flew all 100 people. They did the 1 year preliminary, which according to Dr. Budoff should be enough to show how much that plaque is advancing. And it always advances with age. And we don't know what that data is, but I think it'd be quite interesting to see where that is. So they are doing CT angiograms. The good news is the correlation between CT angiogram and the CAC, the calcium artery score. I feel very, very comfortable saying that if you can get a CAC, and that will give you a great idea of what the more expensive tests will get. They correlate really, really, really well.
That's good information.
I think it was Finland or Denmark that one of the Scandinavian countries that does all their medical care as part of the government. So they have everybody's records. They looked at the difference between the two and found that they correlated really, really well. So you can feel great about doing what I did, a $60, $70 quick scan CT angiogram.
Mine was $0. Yeah, I had a CAC. It was $0. Yeah. I was like,
so I would not. If you tested 0 on CT, I would not do CT angiogram.
Well, you know why he said it? The doctor said it because my lipo A is like 191 and it's supposed to be like under 70, right? Or under 72 or something. So he said, hey man, that's a genetic thing. You can't exercise yourself out of it. But like, unfortunately, the fix for that, because it is genetic, is a statin. And I'm trying not to go down that route. So I'm trying to figure out.
If we want to talk supplements, we can totally do that offline. I mean, there's a couple of things that are really cheap.
Well, no, I think it's not emergent at the moment, but it is of curiosity. So I think makes for great fodder for the show. It gives me a reason to play around with some cool stuff. And
if you can push out statins as much as possible, they're one of my least favorite drugs. Again, I'm not a medical professional, but if they could help more people than they help, which the data that they help people is extremely poor anyway.
Very true.
And they have so many side effects, like the muscle aches, the mental issues that people get. You go look up a video called
depletion of CoQ10.
Yeah, exactly. You can supplement CoQ10. It would be a better thing to do because you deplete that.
Yeah, and I do that.
Look up the video. Statins made me stupid, to see this one dude talk about his experience on a statin where he was like forgetting things, losing his mind, not able to play memory games with his kids anymore. It's pretty scary. So the question is, it is having a high level of cholesterol actually atherogenic, or is cholesterol, which is something that we make way more than we eat, is that something that's helpful and protective that is doing something bad in the body because there's inflammation? If I continually punch my wall and patch it with spackle, if I keep punching and keep patching and keep punching and keep patching, what if cholesterol is the spackle that's fixing the damage that's being caused, but it's not the cholesterol's fault, it's the punching the wall? What if that is the case? You can have a fun question to ask your doctor is, how come we get heart attacks in arteries and never veins? And your doctor would be like, fuck you talking about? Like, yeah, you never get a heart attack in a vein. It's got the same amount of cholesterol. What's going on? How come you only get heart attacks in like 8 or 9 different places in your arteries? They don't just happen everywhere. Why does that happen? They have no explanation. Is it the cholesterol? Or is it damage that's being caused in certain areas by turbulent, areas in blood vessels that then get bombarded by things like seed oils and glucose, that cholesterol comes along and patches up and then creates a plaque. And we go back to the 60s when we blamed cholesterol for all this nonsense bullshit anyway. It was never a thing. It's never been proven ever.
And that's the problem right there, right? Like that I think is why, going back to what we were talking about earlier, why people are so anesthetized to this, because starting in the 50s, we started spinning up this, what was it when people came home from the war and they thought it was like the butter or something like that from all that.
Everything had to be in packages.
And they're like, oh, it must be the cholesterol. And like, so was born the cholesterol myth. But like the China study, which I know has been met with debunk and not debunk, but the China study is interesting at a minimum, right? Because like you would think that this would absolutely be different than it was. So whether we agree in the validity of that study or not, it's still an interesting story and sort of really can't be wholesale discounted or wholesale bought into. But
nope, it's epidemiological. It's what most food studies are, where you take a big group of people and you look and see if there's certain outcomes and you make guesses. But correlation is not causation, which is what the China study is. A large population, this group seems to do this and this group seems to do this. Therefore, it's the diet that's helping people. Well, is that necessarily true? Like, you have to do a randomized controlled trial to be able to prove those things, which you can't really do that easily with nutrition. So the studies like that, you just need to be careful with, because it's just epidemiology. It's not proving anything one way or another. It's just taking a large group, and it's like, I woke up this morning and the sun rose. Did I make the sun rise because I woke up? It happens every day. Like, I might.
Well, I mean, I think the interesting part about the China study for me is it's one thing that I could throw back on doctors and be like, well, look, if what you're saying is true, then a whole bunch of this stuff wouldn't also be true.
Sure.
Right. Like, so like, I feel like we need to have a different conversation, and that's where doctors are a little tough. Even my foo-foo doctor is like, let's put you on a low dose statin to help with this lipo A situation. I'm like,
it's what they know.
Let's have a couple other conversations first of all. Yeah.
It's what they know. It's what they're trained in. They're not trained and adequate. They're inadequate to be able to truly treat root cause, the stuff you guys are pros at. You know what I mean? Like, they're not taught any of that. So you can't blame them. It's just, you need to know that. So I think that's a good point.
Well, Casey, my brother, I could talk to you literally all week, but we got to cut it off somewhere, right?
We should throw this. Yeah, we gotta say where we gotta find you and stuff.
Yeah.
All those things.
Where do people find you? And you want to just tell us anything we don't know yet?
Of course, yeah. It was great to chat with you guys. This was a lot of fun. You can find me and my wife and our small little company on our website, which is myboundlessbody.com. There you'll find links to the podcast. We do releases of our podcast, Boundless Body Radio, 3 days a week. I'm teaching a nutrition seminar in my neighborhood that I record everything and put free meal plans and, outlines and references and all that stuff. That's on the website. You can find that. That's all free. And then the very first thing you see on the page is the Book Now button. So anybody listening, if they're curious about any of this, can book a complimentary session with us, and we just chat about your goals and whatever. I can bounce ideas back and forth with people and see if we can help answer some questions. And so all of that is just located on our website. They can find our socials and YouTube and all that stuff as well. myboundlessbody.com.
Love
awesome.
it.
Thank you so much.
On just a quick side note, I love that like your neck of the woods is cranking out a lot of content creators in all different walks of life. It's a weirdly concentrated geography for a lot of things. Like, and I'm always curious. My wife has actually brought that to my attention. She goes, probably 85% of the, cosmetic influencers that I follow are in Salt Lake or the Salt Lake area.
Oh yeah.
And like the light bulb guy, the LED guy that I follow for Christmas lights is out of Salt Lake. This Dr. ZZZ guy, like, it's like all these funny things. And it's like, there's just a massive amount of data coming out of that area. And I'm like, wow. And you said that today, and I didn't know that until we were on the show. I'm like, God, another Salt Lake content guy. Like, this is amazing.
You've got a lot of people who are in the Mormon religion who go on missions. Like, I grew up Mormon. I served 2 years in Brazil, so I speak Portuguese and English. So you have lots of people who did that. And, missionary work is like sales work. And so you have tons of startups and multi-level marketing companies that come out of here.
That's amazing.
They've got international, kind of influence because you can hire so many people that are bilingual around here. And
is that mission thing like a requirement requirement for the religion? Is that
basically it's not required, but it's expected. We'll say that.
Expected. Okay. Gotcha. That's interesting. That actually explains a lot.
Yeah, there you go.
And it actually makes perfect sense, actually, now that you're saying it. You're like,
people are great at sales and know how to speak 2 languages. It's lucrative.
Fuck,
and yeah,
sure. Why not?
If you went to the gym that I used to work at here in the Valley, like, you do not just go in and clothes that you bought at Target. Like, you got to have the matching Lulu. You got to have your hair done. People do makeup before they go into the gym. I shit you not. Like, you got to be to the nines to go do your workout. Like, it's a thing around here for sure.
That's got to be a little irritating if I'm being, like,
I would probably get thrown out of a gym then.
Yeah.
Like, I roll in, I'm like wearing whatever I went to sleep in.
Get out of here.
The beard's over here. I'm like, all right, can I just lift this a bunch of times and go home?
Yeah, and get the fuck out of here.
Yep.
All right, guys. Appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much, Casey. It was awesome, man.
Again, man.
Enjoy the day, guys.
Thank you so much. All right, take care.
Be subversive, irreverent.
Health is wealth, but you knew that.
Everybody knows that.
But so is following us on social media at Irreverent Health. And check out our website for more exclusive content at irreverenthealth.com.
Oh, I like this.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Irreverent Health.